Morning. I'm out here with Phoebe again. It's about 7:30 in some woods near Truro. It's still quite dark actually, or it's just becoming light, so I don't know how well this will work. But I'm just thinking about, because I was in this spot a couple of days ago when I made a film about self and body, and the space has reminded me of the same thought. I don't know if you get that as well, you know, this, if you find yourself in the same place, doing the same actions, quite often the same thoughts, weirdly, it's running through my head. And here I am on this path, thinking about the same thing to do with self and body. But what I'm thinking of today really is to do with, and this, I know this is bogus actually, even while I'm thinking it, but I've got to put it out, you know what I mean? It's just to do with dualism, I guess. Mind-body dualism, you know, that whole Descartes thing. It is the idea that the mind is made of different stuff. The mind is unextended in Descartes, as the body is extended. You know, the body occupies space, extended in 3 dimensions of space, whereas the mind in Descartes is not. Res cogitans as opposed to res extensa, he says. And of course, that, you know, out of that dualism, which is widely condemned these days, understandably so, out of that dualism all kind of other things flow, but it's a really compelling feeling, isn't it, the fact that this feeling that feels like a fact, that we are bodies with minds attached, or with minds inside, or our bodies in which minds come to fruition and then kind of persist in these bodies, and even whilst our bodies are failing around us quite often, you know. When people get old, my mum's very old now, and thankfully her mind's mostly failed as well now, but you know, for a while it was very evident that her body was failing around her. You know, there was a her that her body was failing around, and that her was a mental construct, something that had come into being inside the body, it seemed like, you know. And as I say, I know this is not, there's no great scientific evidence for that, but it's a compelling illusion, if that's what it is. Actually, illusion isn't the right word. I mean, that's one of the things that Descartes says, isn't it? He says, you know, the one thing that isn't an illusion is the sense of being, of thinking. You know, you can't doubt the fact that you are doubting. You can't doubt the fact that you're undergoing some kind of cognitive process, even if the contents of that cognitive process are entirely illusory. What you can't doubt is the fact of your cognitive existence. So it doesn't make any sense to say some parts without illusion. Anyway, just to say that so whilst that dualism might be an illusion in some way, or a misrepresentation, misunderstanding of what's going on, it is, I think, a significant part of what makes us who we are. There's a really nice little book by Paul Bloom called Descartes' Baby. It's quite short. It's a really, really lovely little book. I haven't read it for a few years. I might have to reread it. Descartes' Baby. And one of the things he says in there, he says we're natural born dualists. We just the makeup of the fabric of our body and our mind and our brain and all that kind of stuff leads to this compelling illusion, or this compelling way of being in the world, in which we feel like we're passengers inside our own flesh. Anyhow, just thinking about that, you know, if what I said last time has any kind of merit at all, which is to do with, what the fuck am I? Have I come the wrong way? Oh no, I'll just go this way, see what happens. If we are kind of passengers in our flesh, if we are little representations, not exactly homunculus, which precede the being of our alive and awakeness, but if this thing we call a we, this thing we call a self, is a kind of information structure built on the template of the body structure that we have, the biochemistry, the physicality, the musculature, the skeleton framework, all that kind of stuff. If this thing we call a self, as I say, is an information structure built on that template and has this kind of relationship to it, one of being a passenger, one of a sense of distance, almost an ironic distance from our own bodies, that we can comment on them and feel distanced from them, then you know, what's the status of that? Because I'll tell you how it feels to me sometimes, and again, this might be idiosyncratic, is it feels like, well, it's partly that it feels like your body is something you come awake in. You know what I mean? I can kind of remember that experience of being 3 or 4 and just like, oh, here I am. You know what I mean? Coming awake in your body with the world already moving and your body already being built, and you just come to consciousness inside your body. Even though your body is making the consciousness, presumably your body and brain together, you come to consciousness within it. Almost like the car produces the driver and the driver says, oh, I'm in a car. You know, it's that kind of a sensation for me. So it's almost, I'm sorry to switch metaphors in mid-flight here, but it's almost as if the body is kind of the growth medium for this consciousness thing, this self thing. You know, almost as if it's the growth medium. It's made of the same stuff, it has the same structures to it, the same basic architecture is at work, in the same that the basic architecture of a plant is the same as the basic architecture of the presumed the dead plant material out of which it's growing, or it's not really fair to say it's dead plant material, is it? The differently organised plant material, the humus in the ground, out of which the plants are growing. You know, it's almost like that. You know what I mean? This body that I'm walking around in here, it's just like animated soil. Sometimes it feels like animated soil, with forces of nature, of course, passing through it. It being rained on, it being going through those chemical exchange processes that soil has. It having its own version of the nitrogen cycle, and then within that soil, it seems to me, this plant is growing, absolutely formed out of that soil, and that's like, you know, your mind or something, your res cogitans, which grows through time and projects its tendrils through time in a way that soil doesn't. You know, because I can imagine the future and remember the past, and I have that kind of extension, that kind of rhizomatic extension in time that bodies don't really have in quite the same way. You know, physical stuff just extends itself in space, doesn't it? Whereas mental stuff seems to extend itself in time. Anyhow, I don't know if that makes any sense. Well, anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that really. I mean, does it... I guess it leads to transhumanism, and it leads to life after death. I don't lead to any of that, does it really? It just means that I feel like my consciousness grows up and dies back in my body, and I wish I did it more gracefully. I wish my body stayed around healthier, longer, or just long enough for my consciousness to die back gracefully into it, and then my body lays down. Perhaps it will, who knows. Anyhow, here we are, and there's Phoebe. Well, Phoebe's bum, to be more accurate.